Hello and welcome to Newsfeed, your daily dose of what people are talking about online, from news stories to what's trending. Now, some of the world's biggest tech companies have taken a battering this week when you look at their latest quarterly figures. The big five, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft, have all signaled they're having to cut costs. Meta, Facebook's parent company, has seen its decade-long revenue growth come to an end. The social media platform turned ambitious virtual world creator has reported its first ever decline since it went public. Meta's total revenue of $28.8 billion is down by 1% compared to the previous year. If you think this drop is insignificant, think again, because its net income has fallen by 36% to $6.7 billion. Now that's a lot of money, even by Meta's standards.
Ouch, problems at Facebook could be running deep. First, they just had their first ever revenue decline, and they've lowered their earnings guidance by 10%. That comes as Mark Zuckerberg says the economy is worse than it was last quarter. And this is leading a lot of folks to wonder, wait a minute, is it actually the economy that's getting it worse? Or is it Facebook that's losing it? Mark Zuckerberg thinks the future is augmented reality and the metaverse, yet markets don't agree. So far, their augmented reality company, Reality Labs, lost $2.8 billion versus making $452 million. That's bad. And their ad pricing has declined 14%, which means they're cramming in more ads while getting less user engagement. Combined with lower forecasts, yikes, Facebook could be a red flag for the economy, or it's the sign of a failing business. They cut expenses by $1 billion, and they're still promising a new VR headset at the end of the year, but I don't know if this is a company I want to invest in.
So it's not hard to see that Meta has had a rough year, even without examining the numbers. The world is recovering from a pandemic. Everyone is going through some tough times. So what sets Meta's troubles apart? Well, Meta makes a lot of its revenue from ads, but recent news suggests that many companies are drawing back from aggressive online marketing practices after the pandemic. The second thing is that Meta really believes the future is its TikTok clone video format Reels. It's been almost forcing those videos on its users, and although it's seen stronger than anticipated engagement trends, CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the company expects more revenue from Reels since it's not making much money at the moment. And of course, there's the rise of TikTok. The Chinese app is quickly taking over social media. While Meta is not getting what it wants from Reels just yet, TikTok is making bank on the same thing.
Instagram's algorithm is so bad at suggesting us suggested posts that I don't even want to see it. It's doing the exact opposite of what they wanted it to do.
The app is dead. I still use it. I think we're all going to still use it for years to come in the same way that we use Facebook still. But I really think it's down that road. Unless they make some major changes, their future is bleak. I don't want to see random suggested posts. Stop trying to be TikTok and just show me my friends' posts, even if it's only 12 posts. I will take it. I just want to see which of my friends got engaged and had a baby.
But despite all that, Meta has found one silver lining, one most analysts weren't expecting to see. Facebook's daily and monthly user count increased by 3% and 1% respectively, reversing its first ever decline in the last quarter. Meanwhile, Google parent company Alphabet has also filed its Q2 earnings. So I'm gonna be real. The results also aren't great, but they're not as bad as analysts feared they'd be, bucking the trend after Snap and Twitter delivered disappointing quarterly reports recently as a choppy economy hit ad revenue. Google's Q2 revenue was 13% higher than the same period last year at $69 billion. That may sound impressive on paper, but do take into account last year, the company grew by 62% as consumer spending rose amid the post-pandemic reopening. Its advertising was hit by the economic slowdown, but not as badly as other tech firms. While ad revenue was up 12% to $56 billion, it was at a much slower rate than the 69% growth recorded a year earlier. And Google Cloud revenue rose 36% to $6.3 billion, although the division is actually still unprofitable, with losses increasing by 45% to $858 million.
The results mark the second straight quarter of year-over-year earnings declines for Google since 2015. The company has been underperforming the S&P 500 and is down almost 28% this year to date.
Google's earnings are out, guys. Let's take a look. They ended up doing $69 billion roughly in revenue for the quarter, which is up 13% year over year. That's pretty solid considering the state of the economy. And so you guys can see here the different segments of the business. We have Google Search and Other, YouTube Ads, Google Network, Google Advertising, yada, 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 Google Cloud. So you guys can see the growth year over year in all these segments. YouTube Ads, they did about $7.3 billion on the quarter. We have Google Network, about $8.2 billion, and a bulk of their money comes from Google Advertising.
Another tech giant trying to keep the ship afloat is Twitter. It's introduced a new feature update so you can add statuses to your tweets. It's almost like using the topics feature on top of adding a hashtag to your tweet, and it looks like this. The list includes statuses such as hot take, shower thoughts, living the dream, and vacation mode. You pick a status and it appears at the top of your tweet text and underneath your profile picture. Currently, the app does not allow any custom statuses, but taking into consideration how frequently Twitter has been introducing new updates, that could soon change. One piece of advice, though, be careful with the shower thoughts status when you have minors around. But not everyone has found the update useful and likened status to, well, basically every other social media platform ever, from Facebook to MySpace. And then there are also those who have been waiting for Twitter Circle to get rolled out and think status is redundant. Since the update has mostly received criticism, the hot take status has become the perfect opportunity for some to say they don't actually mind it. The U.S. has offered a prisoner swap with Russia in order to bring home 2 detained Americans, including women's basketball star Griner. The 2-time Olympic champion has been detained since February 17th, when Russian authorities found vape cartridges containing hash oil in her luggage as she was traveling through a Moscow airport. She was put on trial for the alleged large-scale transportation of drugs that carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. She pleaded guilty to the charge earlier in July, but insisted she had no intent of breaking the law. Experts suggested that the guilty plea was a legal maneuver to get a lesser sentence and facilitate this prisoner swap. Washington is reportedly willing to release Russian arms trafficker Victor Bout in exchange for Griner and U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, who's being held on espionage charges. While teammates and politicians initially kept quiet about the situation in order to allow negotiations with Moscow to proceed, they've cranked up the pressure in recent weeks. A social media campaign was launched under the hashtag WeAreBG and Bring Her Home that's been picked up by other basketball stars like LeBron James and Steph Curry. The WNBA Players Association launched a petition on change.org urging the Biden administration to take action. It has so far received almost 350,000 signatures. U.S. footballer and activist Megan Rapinoe also paid tribute to Griner as she was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the White House, wearing a suit with the letters BG stitched into the lapel. And Griner's fight for freedom will be featured as the latest cover story on Time magazine. U.S. officials say top members of the White House have heard the outcry and are doing everything they can to respond.
That the president and his team are willing to take extraordinary steps to bring our people home, as we've demonstrated with Trevor Reed. And that's what we're doing right here. It's actively happening now. This has been at the top of the mind for the president and for his whole national security team. He receives regular updates about the status of our negotiations to secure Brittany and Paul's release, as well as other U.S. nationals who are wrongfully detained or held hostage in Russia, and I might add, around the world as well.
Let's move on to some environment stories from around the world. And we begin with some good news. Nonprofit environmental group The Ocean Cleanup has removed more than 100,000 kilograms of plastic from the North Pacific Ocean. They collected the marine debris from an area referred to as the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It required about a year of work with more than 45 extractions for the organization to collect all that plastic, which covers an area roughly the size of Luxembourg. Scientists say they would need to repeat the process about 1,000 times to clean the entire North Pacific Ocean. To help understand just how much progress they've made, here's what 1 kilo of plastic looks like.
Start with this random thing. We're almost halfway. We got some nets and ropes here. Got a DVD case. Some crate fragment. Some more smaller fragments. Got an eel trap. Okay, we're very close. So if you now just add a whiff of microplastics. Boom, okay. So this, 100,000 times, now permanently removed from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch.
Yep, that certainly looks like a lot. And our next story, global environmental movement Extinction Rebellion, had a surprise for lawmakers arriving at Australia's Parliament House in Canberra. An enormous zombie koala called Blinky greeted lawmakers howling very, very loudly. The 4-meter-tall puppet is said to represent billions of animals killed in bushfires caused by the climate crisis. Extinction Rebellion said the aim of the protest was to press politicians to take action to reverse climate change. And the protesting zombie did his thing. The Aussie Parliament discussed reducing emissions 43% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. However, the leader of the Australia Greens Party says the target should be 75%.
Labor's 43% target is not compliant with the Paris Agreement. It's not a science-based target. It's based on Australia and the world exceeding 2 degrees of warming. We've been very concerned that the bill may put that weak target into law in a way that would put a handbrake on future governments that might be willing to act according to the science.
And Disney's promoting what it calls a magical tour that's basically carbon emissions galore. For just $110,000, you can also waste 6.2 tons of carbon thanks to its latest VIP tour. Oh, but actually no, you can't because it's all sold out. This 24-day-long tour takes its guests to 12 Disney resorts in 6 countries on 3 different continents. A single person on the tour causes more pollution in a day than most countries do in an entire year. These numbers have once again sparked discussions of carbon inequality. Due to the wealthiest 10% of the population's waste, many poor countries have to deal with the severe consequences of the climate crisis. A Turkish woman working in the Netherlands has gone viral for chasing away a thief brandishing a huge knife. Latife Peker, who's originally from the city of Konya, was cleaning the counter at the bakery where she works. We see a masked man enter wielding a meat cleaver. Latife reacts by attacking the robber with a cloth and a bottle of detergent. Extraordinarily, she forces him to the floor. As the robber flees, he gets a kicking from a man who's entered to ensure he never comes back. Wow, wouldn't want to go up against her. All right, our next story. You remember when millennials were advised to stop eating overpriced avocados if they wanted to buy a house? Well, whether or not you agree with that, it's certainly not the case if you're living in Australia. The agribusiness bank Rabobank has reported that the country has a surplus of, that's right, avocados, and that Aussies should consume and export more avocados since there is a massive rise in supply. So prices are going down. The report says for each Aussie, there are now 22 avocados. Yum. So to help out our friends in Australia, here's a quick avocado on toast recipe so you can go and make yourself one right now. Well, I'm definitely going to try and make that later. And that brings us to the end of our show. You can find us on YouTube. Do subscribe and share your thoughts in our comment section. See you same time tomorrow.